The chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. For centuries, it had been a place of endless voices, of arguments, of debates that lasted for days. Thousands of alien leaders from across the stars filled the great hall, their shapes and colors forming a sea of life that stretched as far as the eye could see. They had gathered for one purpose: to hear humanity's answer. They expected shouting, desperate pleas, or fiery threats. But what they received was something no one in the galaxy had imagined. The humans stood slowly. They did not raise their voices. They did not fight for attention. Their faces were calm, too calm for a species that had just been humiliated in front of the galaxy. Every alien in the chamber leaned forward, waiting for them to speak. The silence grew heavy, almost painful. Some thought the humans would beg. Others believed they would make one final threat. Instead, the humans only looked around the chamber once, their eyes sweeping over thousands of alien faces. Then, without a single word, they turned and began to walk away. The sound of their footsteps echoed across the vast hall. That was all. Step after step, their boots struck the floor like the beating of a war drum. No one dared to interrupt. No one dared to stop them. The humans walked out of the chamber with a calmness that felt unnatural. And when the great doors closed behind them, the silence remained. Whispers began to spread, soft at first, then louder. Alien leaders exchanged glances, confused and unsettled. Some whispered, "Why did they not speak?" Others asked, "Was this surrender? Or something else?" The council had stripped humanity of its rights, cast them aside as if they were nothing. Every species expected humans to resist, to cry out, to protest. Yet they did none of these things. The silence was worse than any words. It was like a shadow that stretched across the chamber. Many alien leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had fought wars, faced rebellions, seen entire planets burn. But this silence was different. It felt like a promise. A promise that one day, something would come, though no one knew when or how. The High Speaker of the Council finally broke the silence. His voice trembled as he tried to assure the chamber that this was victory. "The humans have accepted their fate," he declared. "They are no longer a part of the council. They are nothing." But his words felt thin, empty. Even as he spoke, no one believed him. The image of the humans walking away stayed in every mind. Across the chamber, fear began to grow. Some species whispered that humans had been broken, that they would fade into history. Others shook their heads and said no, humans were not the kind to break so easily. They were a species born on a death world, a place that killed the weak and forced the strong to rise. If they walked away without a word, it could only mean one thing: they had already decided what came next. Outside the chamber, messengers rushed to their ships, carrying the news across the stars. By the time the humans reached their vessels and vanished into the dark void of space, the whispers had already spread to distant empires. On countless worlds, beings asked the same question: why were the humans silent? For some, the silence was comforting. They told themselves humanity had given up, that the danger had passed. But for others, the silence was terrifying. They remembered human history, the wars they had fought, the enemies they had crushed. Humanity did not forgive easily, and they never forgot. In the days that followed, the council chamber grew restless. Rumors filled the air like smoke. Reports came in from traders and scouts: human ships were no longer seen in common routes. Colonies that once welcomed visitors now stood empty, closed to outsiders. Humanity was withdrawing, pulling back into the shadows. And with every report, the fear grew stronger. The silence was not weakness. The silence was waiting. Alien leaders gathered in secret, trying to guess what humans were planning. Some argued that humanity was finished, broken by exile. Others warned that this was only the beginning, that humans were preparing something larger than anyone could see. But no one knew the truth. The mystery was worse than open war. It was like standing in a dark room, knowing something was moving in the shadows, but never seeing where it was. In spaceports and marketplaces, ordinary aliens whispered about the day humans walked away. Merchants lowered their voices as they traded stories. Pilots swore they had seen human fleets gathering at the edge of known space. Soldiers claimed humanity was building weapons beyond imagination. No proof ever came, but the fear spread like fire. The Council tried to calm the galaxy. They announced that humanity was no threat, that the Council's decision had ended the matter. But their voices carried no strength. Every time the Council spoke, someone would whisper back, "Then why were they so silent? Why did they walk away like that?" The silence was more powerful than any speech. It sank into the hearts of billions. Children in distant worlds asked their parents what humans would do. Parents could not answer. Soldiers sharpened their weapons. Politicians looked to the stars with unease. And somewhere in the dark, humanity was watching. They had walked away, yes. They had left the Council without a fight. But their silence was not surrender. It was a warning. One day, the galaxy would understand. The Council would remember this day not as a victory, but as the moment the galaxy began to hold its breath. Because silence is never empty. Silence always hides something. And humanity's silence hid a storm. The galaxy did not forget the day the humans walked away. Even weeks later, the memory lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. On alien homeworlds, in busy trade stations, in the quiet halls of governments, the same question repeated again and again: why had they left in silence? At first, some tried to laugh at it. They told themselves it was weakness, that the humans had been broken by the Council's decision. They were exiled, cut off, stripped of influence. Surely, they would retreat into the small corner of space they still held and never be heard from again. But deep down, even those who mocked them did not truly believe their own words. Something about the way the humans had left had unsettled everyone. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of patience. Reports began to trickle in. Merchants who once relied on human trade complained that human ships no longer visited their ports. Long-established routes where human cargo vessels passed every week had gone dark. Colonies that had always welcomed travelers suddenly closed their borders, turning away all outsiders. At first, this was seen as disorganization, a sign of collapse. But as the reports piled higher, it became clear it was deliberate. Humanity was pulling back. In the council chamber, fear began to replace arrogance. The representatives argued among themselves. Some shouted that humans were finished and should be ignored. Others warned that such silence was dangerous, that humanity must be watched carefully. The debates grew longer, harsher, and no agreement was ever reached. Each alien empire looked at the others with suspicion, wondering who would be the first target if humans decided to strike back. On the outer edges of the galaxy, rumors spread like wildfire. Pilots whispered that they had seen strange movements in human space. Entire fleets spotted for only a moment before vanishing into the dark. Unexplained signals echoing from deep space, cut short before anyone could trace them. Stories grew larger with every telling, and the truth was impossible to find. But whether the rumors were true or not no longer mattered. Fear was enough. Ordinary people began to feel it too. In crowded markets, shoppers spoke in low voices, asking if humanity was planning something. Soldiers on distant garrisons polished their weapons and stood a little straighter, as if waiting for an enemy to appear. Children overheard their parents' whispers and asked questions no one could answer. The silence was spreading beyond governments and into the very hearts of everyday lives. The most unsettling part was that no message came. Humanity did not release any statement. No leader appeared on broadcast. No threat was made, no demand was voiced. Their silence was total, and that made it unbearable. Every other species in the galaxy had always shouted, argued, demanded attention. But humans had simply walked away and vanished into their own space, and the emptiness they left behind felt heavier than war. In secret, some council members admitted what others feared to say aloud. Humanity was not broken. They were preparing. They were gathering their strength in silence, away from watching eyes. And when they returned, no one would be ready. The galaxy held its breath a little tighter with every passing day. Ships traveled with more caution, trade slowed, and even the most powerful empires felt unease gnawing at them. Silence had become a weapon, and humanity wielded it without effort. Somewhere, in the depths of their space, Hidden behind the silence, humanity was watching. Waiting. Planning. And though no one could prove it, everyone could feel it, the storm was drawing closer. The silence of humanity's departure spread across the galaxy like a cold wind. In the first days, many believed it meant nothing. They told themselves humans were finished, cut away from the council, too weak to matter. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence became harder to ignore. Trade routes once filled with human cargo ships grew empty. Space stations that always welcomed merchants now closed their ports. Colonies where humans lived and thrived went quiet, refusing visitors. What had seemed like exile began to look like something else. It was not collapse. It was retreat. A deliberate step back into the shadows. Alien merchants complained loudly. Profits fell. Trade slowed. But beneath the frustration was something darker, fear. If humans had simply given up, they would still be seen, still be begging for scraps of trade. Instead, they vanished. And when a predator vanishes, it is never a good sign. In the council chamber, the leaders argued endlessly. Some stood tall and declared that the humans were broken, that their silence was proof of weakness. Others warned that silence was never weakness when it came to humans. Their history showed it. Humans endured storms, rebuilt after disasters, and always returned stronger. Now, with every passing day, more voices joined the side of fear. Whispers filled the halls. A scout swore he had seen human warships at the edge of a system, watching but never approaching. A trader claimed entire fleets were gathering in deep space. None of the stories could be confirmed, but none could be denied either. And so the fear grew. On alien worlds far from the council, ordinary people began to feel it too. Markets grew quieter. Conversations turned to hushed voices. Families wondered if war was coming. Children asked what humans were planning, and no parent had an answer. The council tried to calm the galaxy with speeches. They said exile had ended the danger. They said humanity would fade. But even as they spoke, the image of humans walking away without a word haunted every mind. That calmness had not been surrender. It had been something else, something no one could name. And so the galaxy watched human space with unease. Every flicker of movement on a sensor became a cause for alarm. Every missing ship became a sign of human action. Every whisper carried more weight than the truth. The silence of humanity was not weakness. It was a wall, hiding their plans. And behind that wall, something was growing. Something the galaxy could not see, but could not stop imagining. All across the stars, the silence of humanity began to change from mystery into fear. At first it was whispers, then it became more than that. Reports reached the Council of Colonies once allied with humans suddenly going dark. Worlds that had depended on human protection, or once shared their technology, were now silent. No distress signals, no trade, no movement. Just empty skies where life had once thrived. Some believed pirates had struck, others claimed it was natural disaster. But the pattern was too clean, too deliberate. Every missing colony had one thing in common: they had once stood close to humanity. It seemed as if a shadow was falling over anyone who had betrayed them, anyone who had abandoned them when the council cast its vote. In the council chamber, fear twisted into anger. Representatives shouted at each other, demanding answers, accusing rivals of hiding the truth. Old alliances began to break apart. Some empires wanted to send fleets into human space to test their strength. Others begged for patience, warning that such a move could spark a war no one could survive. The debates grew bitter, filled with threats, and every day the chamber slipped further into chaos. On the edges of known space, merchants swore they had seen human ships, dark and silent, drifting near abandoned colonies. They said the humans were not speaking, not fighting, only watching. Some ships vanished after those encounters, lost without explanation. Survivors whispered that the humans had returned in the shadows, and they were choosing their moments carefully. The silence of humanity was no longer just a mystery, it had become punishment. Allies who had betrayed them were falling one by one, and yet no one could prove the humans were responsible. It was as if the galaxy itself had turned against them, but in every frightened mind the answer was the same: humans were behind it. Families on alien worlds began to feel the tension. Soldiers were ordered to stand guard through sleepless nights. Fleets were recalled to protect home systems. Ordinary people lowered their voices when they spoke of humans, afraid that even saying the word too loudly might invite their attention. The Council tried to regain control, but every message they sent was drowned in doubt. No one trusted their words. No one believed the humans had vanished. The silence had stretched too long, grown too deep, and now it was breaking the galaxy apart from the inside. And somewhere, hidden beyond the reach of Council eyes, humanity was watching. The storm they carried had not yet broken, but already the galaxy trembled under its shadow. The first sighting came without warning. A small patrol ship, belonging to a mid-sized empire on the edge of Council space, reported a shadow at the edge of their system. At first, they thought it was a sensor error, too large, too silent, and too precise to be normal traffic. But then the shape grew clear. A human warship. It did not attack. It did not hail. It did not move closer. It simply drifted at the very edge of the system, its dark hull outlined against the stars. For hours it remained, watching. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished back into the void. The crew sent their report in panic. By the time the Council debated its meaning, more reports arrived from other sectors. Human ships had been seen again, always at the edge of systems, never crossing into them, never firing a shot. Some appeared for minutes, others for days, and then disappeared without trace. They left no wreckage, no messages, only the memory of their silent presence. Fear spread like a sickness. Entire fleets were placed on alert. Worlds strengthened their defenses. Yet the humans did nothing more than watch. To many, this was worse than open war. An enemy you could see and fight was less terrifying than one who appeared and vanished at will, as if testing the galaxy, measuring it. In the Council, chaos deepened. Some demanded preemptive strikes into human territory, convinced that silence and shadow were only the beginning of a larger plan. Others argued such an action would doom them all, that humanity was only waiting for a reason to unleash its strength. Voices rose, threats were made, and old rivalries boiled to the surface. The Council was no longer united, it was breaking piece by piece. Out in the wider galaxy, the sightings grew into legend. Pilots whispered that human ships could cloak themselves, appearing from nothing. Traders claimed they had seen fleets larger than any empire possessed, gathered in silence far beyond known space. Stories twisted and grew, feeding the fear until no one knew what was truth and what was rumor. But all agreed on one thing: the humans were preparing. Ordinary citizens began to live under the shadow of dread. Every flicker on a sensor screen, every lost signal, every unexplained delay was blamed on humanity. Soldiers stared out into the dark void with unease, knowing the humans were out there, watching. The silence had returned, but this time it carried weight. It was not the silence of departure. It was the silence of a predator studying its prey. And everyone knew, sooner or later, the humans would no longer be content to simply watch. The galaxy began to turn on itself long before humanity fired a single shot. The silence, the rumors, the endless sightings of warships at the edge of systems, it was enough to shatter fragile alliances that had held for centuries. Trust between empires collapsed like brittle glass. Small border disputes flared into sudden wars. Old rivals accused each other of secretly working with humanity, and fleets were sent to prove strength. Neighbors who had once traded peacefully now armed themselves, suspicious of every movement, every unanswered signal. The Council tried to call for calm, but its words carried no weight anymore. Its members argued among themselves louder than ever, and soon even those meetings broke apart in anger. In some regions, chaos ruled completely. Pirates thrived as trade collapsed. Merchants refused to travel near human space, convinced they would never return. Colonies on the outer rim begged their governments for protection, but the governments had no ships to spare, they were too busy preparing for what they feared was coming. The strangest part was that humanity did not appear. No fleets crossed borders, no attacks were launched. Yet everywhere, the signs of collapse spread. It was as if the galaxy had convinced itself that war was inevitable, and so it began to destroy itself before the humans ever moved. In markets, the whispers grew darker. Some claimed humans were waiting until the galaxy tore itself apart before striking. Others believed humanity had already infiltrated worlds, watching from within, guiding the chaos. Parents told their children to stay close, as if even speaking too loudly might bring human attention. Soldiers stared into empty skies, fingers resting on triggers, waiting for an enemy they could not see. The silence had become unbearable. Every empire spent more resources preparing for humanity than ruling their own people. The cost was heavy: shortages, unrest, rebellions rising in places once secure. Civilizations cracked under the pressure of fear, and still the humans did nothing. It was a trap without walls, a war without battles. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and humanity's silence was the blade that cut deepest. Somewhere in the dark, the humans were waiting, patient as stone. And when the galaxy finally broke, they would be ready to step forward.
The day finally came when the silence ended, not with words, but with shadows of steel. At first, it was a single report, a fleet sighted at the edge of a distant system. Then another, and another. Within hours, dozens of empires were sending urgent messages to the Council. Human warships had appeared, not in one place, but in many, spread across the stars like a net slowly closing in. They did not fire. They did not speak. They simply arrived, their vast shapes filling skies above colonies, drifting beyond trade lanes, resting at the borders of powerful empires. Their presence was enough to freeze every world they entered. No one dared to move against them. The ships were not the same as before. They were larger, darker, sharper in design. Their hulls bore no markings, no signs of weakness. The weapons they carried glowed with quiet energy, and even from a distance, other ships could feel the weight of their power. In the silence of space, the message was clear: humanity had not been idle. They had built, they had prepared, and they had returned stronger than anyone imagined. The galaxy trembled. Fleets scrambled to defend their worlds, but no attack came. Council leaders demanded communication, but the humans sent no reply. They only stood there, waiting, watching, filling the skies with their silent threat. For the first time in living memory, empires that had fought each other turned their weapons outward, united not by friendship, but by fear of the same shadow. On alien worlds, panic spread faster than light. Civilians looked up at the night sky and wondered if human ships were already there, invisible and waiting. Families packed what little they could, ready to flee though they had nowhere to go. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives found their courage faltering as they faced an enemy who needed no words. The council met in emergency session, but it was chaos. Some demanded surrender before a single shot was fired. Others screamed for war, insisting humanity must be pushed back before it was too late. Voices overlapped, alliances cracked, and no decision was made. All the while, the humans remained silent, their fleets steady, unmoving, patient. The galaxy understood then what had been hidden all along. The silence had not been weakness. It had been time. Time for humanity to grow, to prepare, to rise again. And now they had returned, not as exiles, but as a storm spread across the stars. No one knew what they wanted. No one knew when they would act. But everyone knew one truth: the balance of the galaxy had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fleets hung over the stars like a curtain of shadow, spread across systems from one end of the galaxy to the other. Days passed, then weeks, and still the humans said nothing. Their ships did not move, did not fire, did not retreat. They only remained, an unspoken warning in every sky they touched. Entire civilizations froze under their gaze. Trade stopped completely. Wars between empires ended, not out of peace, but out of fear. No one dared to waste strength on rivals when the humans stood waiting. It was as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath, unwilling to release even a whisper until the silence was broken. And then, at last, it happened. A single transmission cut through the void, reaching every council channel, every empire, every station and colony. It was not long, not complex. Only a single voice, calm and steady, speaking in the simple language that everyone understood. We remember. That was all. No threat followed, no demands, no declaration of war. Just two words, carrying the weight of centuries. 2 words that reminded the galaxy of every betrayal, every insult, every moment of arrogance the Council had shown when it cast humanity aside. 2 words that promised humanity had not forgotten, and never would. The reaction was immediate. Some leaders screamed for surrender, begging to reach humans before it was too late. Others demanded their fleets prepare for war, convinced those words meant the end had already begun. On ordinary worlds, panic broke into chaos as people wondered what remembering would mean. Would it be punishment? Would it be conquest? Or something worse, something no one could yet imagine? But humanity did not explain. Their fleets remained, silent and waiting. The Council argued, the empires panicked, and still the humans made no further move. Their silence after those 2 words was even heavier than before, pressing on every mind, every world, every corner of the galaxy. The truth settled slowly across billions of hearts. The Council had thought the day humanity walked away was the end of their story. But it had only been the beginning. That silence had not been surrender, it had been the first breath before the storm. Now, the storm had arrived. And the galaxy could do nothing but wait.